Hello everyone, my name is Lizeth Hurtado and the title of my project is Latina Language Teachers Acuerpada Teaching Narratives on Gender Construction in Cross-Cultural Context. So I want to start this presentation by introducing myself. I am a Colombian language teacher who is currently working in a cross-cultural context. I'm now working in a public school in North America. Not only being a teacher, but also as a woman, I have experienced the societal and patriarchal expectations that are set on us as women, on our bodies, on our ways of being, on our ways of behaving, speaking. And growing up, I was trying to understand what a woman should be. Um, but I could see that these societal expectations and these gender ideas were everywhere and were set on us, were set on our bodies. Um, so now working also as a teacher and working in a cross-cultural context, I see that this hasn't escaped that reality, which brings me to the idea of cross-cultural context. I'm working with Latinas, female teachers, uh, who or my purpose or my interest is to reveal how these teaching experiences, pedagogical practices in a cross-cultural context demonstrate the construction of gender of these Latinas female teachers, also reflecting and understanding their identities and their teaching experiences. And indeed, based on research, there is a gap as there is a lack of information on Latina language female teachers' narratives on their construction of gender in a cross-cultural context in which my study relies on. And for my research interests, as I was mentioning before, in the educational context, there are colonial and patriarchal discourses on educational cross-cultural context. So in these cross-cultural experiences, the teachers encounter societal expectations that are not only set on us, on our gender as being women, but also on race as being Colombian, as being Peruvian, and this is reflected through narratives. So we as women have been objectified and we have been sexualized. We have been set on these specific aspects of being a woman, and our bodies reflect that. Our bodies have that. So the idea is to demonstrate or to reflect through narratives these experiences live in the Latina female teachers' bodies. My main research questions is what do Latina female language teachers acuerpada teaching narratives reveal about the construction of gender in cross-cultural classrooms? The sub-questions is in what ways do Latina teachers acuerpada narratives highlight how stereotypical gender constructions are resisted or produced in cross-cultural classrooms? And the second one is to what extent do acuerpada teaching experiences reveal the intersection of gender, culture, and professional identity in Latina educators' lives? For the research objective, the main research objective is to reflect what the acuerpada narratives of Latina female language teachers reveal about the construction of gender in cross-cultural classrooms. The specific objective is to unveil in what ways acuerpada narratives highlight how stereotypical gender constructions are resisted or reproduced in cross-cultural classrooms, and finally to explore how the cross-cultural acuerpada teaching experiences reveal an intersection of gender, culture, and professional identity in Latina female language educator lives. So for the literature review, I follow a Prisma process in which I search, there was a database search of an amount of research, but they were removed or they were excluded based on a criteria. And these were the main categories: cross-cultural teaching, teachers and gender stereotypes, and teachers' gender narratives, in which the cross-cultural teaching could identify the professional teacher identity, which is influenced by the cross-cultural teaching identity or experience. The teachers and gender stereotypes, it also demonstrates that gender is everywhere, for example, in the schools, but it is not highlighted as such. However, it is in the hidden curriculum as it exists there. And finally, the teachers' gender narratives, it also demonstrates how teachers reflect in their narratives, also taking into account gender and race. However, also the question relies on what hasn't been done, which is, as I was mentioning at the beginning, and using what my research also focuses in Latina female language narratives and on revealing their construction of gender in a cross-cultural context. For the theoretical framework, I have intersectionality from Crenshaw, Hill and Bilge, and the location of culture by Baba, the cross-cultural teaching, the cultural politics of English from Pennycook, on the coloniality, Magnolia and Walsh, and language and culture from Cramsh, and identidades políticas alteradas históricas from Segato, colonialidad y género from Lugones, and gender trouble, feminism and the subversion of identity from Butler. And finally, acuerpamiento, which is lens that is highlighted throughout my research, from CAPNAL, Feminismos Diversos, el feminismo comunitario. Now the research methodology, I decided to call the three female language teachers otras cuerpas as we reflect on our bodies, and as I was saying, all these experiences are set in our bodies and are here in our bodies. So that's why otras cuerpas. So they are three female language teachers from Latin American countries. One teacher is from Colombia, El Salvador, and Peru. The research paradigm is qualitative from Creswell. The research design is narrative research from Barquisen, and the feminist lens and acuerpamiento from Capnal. The instruments were live story interviews and multimodal narratives, and the data analysis was based on Barquisen in story, all in capital letters, story, the first one in capital letter, and story all in lowercase. And also it was adapted to include acuerpamiento. So for the data analysis, there was a process in which I include multimodal narratives in drawings. So I asked the teachers to draw a memory from their teaching experiences, so I could use that drawing to start the conversation and have a fluid and more interactive conversation with the three teachers. And then there is the life story interviews, and it was analyzed on story, which story all in capital letters reflects a wider perspective, societal and cultural perspective. Story, the first one in capital letter, reflects narrow experience based on culture aspects, but that are set on the person. And a story all in lowercase is the personal stories, the personal experience from the teachers in this case. And it was also adapted to take into account acuerpamiento, as I also put my own perspective as a woman and as a teacher, as a Latina, to reflect also on these teachers' experiences and to have this connection on theirs and mine. So this is Vanessa. She was the first teacher I interviewed. This was the drawing she drew, and this is the analysis. This is the analysis of Vanessa. In this case, in this first part, or in this first analysis, Vanessa mentioned the internalized societal expectations, which is based on, which it relies on a story, the first one in uppercase, on what a woman at 31 years old should have achieved. In this case, it is, she mentioned marriage and having kids. And these ideas of what a woman should have achieved reinforces the expectations that are set on us, on our bodies. In a macro perspective, story all in uppercase, these societal discourses are in metaphors, because she mentions ya la dejó el tren, which is this metaphor brings the rooted patriarchal discourses that reinforces gender oppressions in the ways we as women should see marriage, should see motherhood at a certain age. Because in this case, metaphors not only reflects this linguistic element, but it also reflects our understanding, cognitive understanding of how the world works, of our cultural understanding. So this metaphor of ya la dejó el tren highlights the societal expectations that are set on our bodies, and this pressure of having children and getting married at a certain age. Now this second, because there are three excerpts, the second one, it is more about, the first one was more about how Vanessa um, how Vanessa came into the United States. It was 20 years ago. And now, how were her first experiences as a Latina teacher working in a cross-cultural context? So in this second one, Vanessa mentions what challenges she faced as a migrant woman and as an educator. So in her body, as a Latina woman, she carries these assumptions from her students, as her students perceive her as savage. And that reveals an Eurocentric and colonialist perspective that we hold this belief that non-Western societies are less advanced. Which is an example of how ethnicity, nationality, gender intersect in our classroom, which is also brought into story, the first one in capital letter. So these experiences as a migrant woman, Vanessa experiences as a migrant and as a teacher, imply that ethnicity and gender interact in our classroom to shape this educational setting, which still holds hegemonic patriarchal ideas that intersect with ethnicity, gender, and knowledge. And the final one is how Vanessa is related to construction of gender in her classroom. And this last one, I could analyze and reflect that gender is embodied in our ways of behaving and perceiving the world through the expectations that are set or that are oriented around. So based on Vanessa's discourses on how Vanessa perceives her own view, so she mentions, si es mi estudiante, no diría nada porque aquí ya es la libre manera de que los papás los quieran vestir o traer al colegio. Based on her personal and pedagogical perspective, I could see that from Vanessa's position as teacher, she has an active role towards gender construction. Like all teachers have an active role towards gender construction, by her discourses, by her way of acting, behaving. However, Vanessa views the classroom as genderless, as gender is not approached in the classroom as such, but it can be consciously or unconsciously, but gender is still there. However, Vanessa sees the classroom as genderless. And as I haven't finished writing my research paper, these are some preliminary findings. So consciously or unconsciously, gender stereotypes are perpetuated by ignoring them, as in the case of Vanessa, or perceiving the classroom as genderless. Second one is narrative reveals how patriarchal norms are adapted and produced in cross-cultural context in which gender intersects with culture, as in the case of Vanessa. And finally, Latina women are socially reduced and constructed as savage by exoticizing their bodies and identity, as also how Vanessa's students perceived her as savage. And these are also some conclusions. These cross-cultural experiences have shown the universalization of patriarchy. So these patriarchal ideas or patriarchal expectations that are set on us are were the same as if I were in Colombia or as if I am here in the United States. And patriarchy has a common narrative in these Latina female bodies. And for the action plan, I use acuerpamiento as a lens of feminism, as a frame of analysis. So it helped me to understand from a better perspective and to relate with the experiences of these Latina teachers in a better perspective, in a more in a perspective that our bodies could connect and I could reflect on them and I could understand also their experiences also as a women, as a Latinas, and as teachers, as Latinos and as teachers. These are the references, and thank you.